press record.
Okay. Yeah, you glitched twice.
Oh, did I? Oh,
And my Wi-Fi is looking a bit pale.
okay. We just recently had our Wi-Fi put in like an updated version in our studios.
Yeah. Well, this
It's
one's
not.
normally excellent. It's the landlord's Wi-Fi from upstairs, but it's normally
Oh, okay.
excellent. But it's looking a
Yeah.
bit weak at the moment, a bit grey. But hopefully
Oh,
we won't
okay.
get too many glitches.
Yes. One hopes. Did you accept? I think you have to accept the recording.
I think I did, yeah. Yeah.
Okay, good. Okay, that's lovely. Well, yeah, thank you to have the conversation. I'm really pleased to be able to have a conversation with yourself, to be honest. I've been really looking at your book as well, reading. I've read
Oh,
the introduction, and I have also started reading generally the content. Very, very interesting, really fascinated with it. I've got a couple of questions from what I have read of that, which I will also at some point during our conversation bring up in
hmm.
conversation. Um, I Yeah, so for me, I wanted to have a studio visit with you because the nature of my own work, and I know before you were included on a panel discussion that I put on about a show that I organised a while ago now. Um,
The
and I
transition gallery, or
Yeah, that's
yeah.
right. 10 years ago now, though. Um, So because you were part of the panel, I know your background, I know your work, I know what you're writing about in terms of class politics,
Hmm.
that I find really interesting in relation to what I'm doing. And I just thought it'd be an ideal opportunity to
Yeah,
talk
thanks
and
for inviting me. I like being invited. You get fed up with knocking on doors. It's much nicer when people just invite you.
yeah, does help. Yeah, it's nice. So yeah,
But there's a whole class story in that. I say there's a whole class
yes,
story in that idea of being, are you a person who has to knock on doors, or are you a person who's invited in?
yeah, I can see that point. Yeah, I can see that. It's probably why my door is very quiet.
Maybe I should do some kind of performance about knocking on doors or
Yeah,
something.
absolutely. Yeah, for sure, definitely. Be interesting.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
about 10 years since then, and you won a prize. I was trying to remember the story actually, because you'd won a prize recently, haven't you? And
Um,
part of the prize was that show, or something. And then I think I got commissioned to write something at some point.
okay.
But I've
Okay. If
forgotten
I,
how it all hang together now.
yeah, well, that painting prize back in 2014, that was separate from the show that I organised at Transition. That whole thing at Transition was something that
Hmm.
funny enough, I had a conversation with the artist George Shaw going back years ago,
Hmm.
and we were standing outside for his art fair, and he said to me that, if you're not um, if you're not being picked up by a gallery or you're not showing a lot, organize things, do something yourself.
Yeah.
And that stayed with me, that advice. And then a few years later, wanted to not only make the work but also try and create a conversation. And so many people said that around that time, when it came to painting, a lot of painting that was being made was very much abstract expressionism, that kind of return to that kind of abstract painting that was going on then 10 years ago. And I felt like, what about my voice as an artist? And I felt like I wasn't really being like a conversation needed to be had, and that's why I approached Transition Gallery proposal about um,
New realism,
yeah,
wasn't it? Yeah.
that's right. Yeah, and yeah, they were fantastic. They really supported it, especially Alex Mitchum supported the ideas. Said that it was nice to see me putting my head over, out of the water and trying to do something. And that show was all put that show on. There's a couple of artists, obviously, with the panel discussion that you guys were part of. But that happened just so the proposal was about 2 or 3 months before May. Obviously, like most painters, we apply for shows such as John Moore's, you know, big prizes. Now, East London Painting Prize was a very new painting prize in London, and you didn't have to pay for the application, which was great, which was lovely. So I applied for that, and the opening night of the show, the painting prize, coincided with me and the artist Nick Middleton putting up the show at Transition. So I was putting it up during the day, rushed to my studio when it was over in Bethnal Green, got changed, and then went back to Stratford because the prize, the exhibition, was actually in my hometown, Stratford. And I was like, this is ideal. So it was almost like it was written in the stars. And then went to the exhibition opening, as you do, drink some wine. And it was that evening when I found out I won the prize. And it was like, oh my word. Transition gallery staff were there because I think they had works in the show. And then it was at that point I was able, during the speech that I gave, if you call it a speech, I had a chance to promote the show. Now, winning the prize gave me a certain amount of money, and as someone who knows what it's like to not get a lot of money as an artist, I really wanted to make sure that the guys that are on the panel discussion, I wanted to give them at least some kind of, token, if you want to call it that, to show. Yeah, it was my way of showing my appreciation for you guys, because I have a lot of respect for you, and that's why for me it was a really interesting moment. But the reason why things really drifted off in terms of trying to make things happen is because of changes in my personal life, which was a huge.
You stopped living directly in London and moved a bit out to Rochester.
That was a couple of years ago, about 5 years ago now. But so for the last 10 years, the first 5 years were changes, as in became single, my wife. I then deal with that, and it affected my studio practice as well.
So volcano,
so it went very quiet in terms of doing any shows, and but over the last few years I'm making work and trying to.
It looks like it. I was looking at your PDF. It looks like you're busy.
Yeah, trying. Do my best, but yeah. So
it must be nice being based in Rochester in a way, to be a bit out of the noise and crowdedness of the city.
Yeah, it's 30 minutes back into London, so it's not far.
To London Bridge.
Are you there? Oh,
hello. Yeah, we've got another glitch. Sorry, we've got another glitch here. Hello. Maybe I can put something in the chat. We're going to close down and start over.
Good. Yeah, bye.
Did you go out and come back in again?
Are you there? Can you hear me?
Yeah, it's a little bit shaky.
Okay.
I think it must be my Wi-Fi, because my Wi-Fi is looking very grey and weak.
Yeah.
But normally it's okay. I use it a lot in teaching. You know, I do a lot of teaching online. Normally it's okay.
Yeah.
But
okay, let's keep going. So
just try again.
Yes, we should be okay.
Maybe we should cut to the chase and
talk
about these questions and particular works.
Yes, of course. Yes. Okay.
Wi-Fi willing.
Yeah. Yes. Yes. Yeah. So you obviously you generally know the work that I do. It's mainly oil. I used to work with enamel paint for quite some time.
Enamel, like George
yes.
Short, yeah.
Yes. Yes. Very much so. Oh gosh. Yes. Let me just bring up this file so I can look at what I just.
Can I ask a question about what I saw in the PDF?
Yes, please do.
I was going through the PDF of images you sent me. I didn't take a lot of notice of the date, so I'm not quite sure of the chronology of it.
Okay.
But I just wanted to ask you something. You've probably been asked many times before, but can you say something about the way your paintings often feature people with their heads turned away from the audience in a way? Frozen again. I think I'm going to leave the meeting and I think I should leave the meeting maybe and start up again. It's not really working very well. I think I should close down my Wi-Fi and open the Wi-Fi again. That looks healthier now, but I can't see you.
Right. I don't know why it keeps dropping.
I closed without closing the Zoom call, I closed down my Wi-Fi and reopened my Wi-Fi, and now it looks a little bit bolder. It's got
that's good.
It's got like 2 dark bars, whereas before it had 3 or 4 grey bars.
Right. Okay.
It looks a bit healthier. Should we try again?
Yes, of course. Yes, I think it's recording still. So, yeah, it's recording.
Okay.
Oh, I mean, yeah. So yes, So you were mentioning the dates.
Well, no. What I was talking about in the question was the fact that a lot of the paintings have figures whose face is turned away from the audience, the artist, from the world, from something. A lot of people seem to have their heads turned away, which could just be a coincidence of the pictures you're taking, but nevertheless, it seems quite a consistent theme, and I wonder what you thought about that.
So most of the time when I was out and about, so if I was either maybe at home or in a cafe or a laundrette, a lot of the time much of the time is I just want to be able to document people getting on with activities. So as soon as if I try to get someone's attention, as if they become aware that they're being photographed. And it feels for me they become.
Well, that's a practical explanation for why it happens, but for the audience, there's another. It creates a different proposition, doesn't it? because
Okay.
for the audience, they feel like the audience feels like it's being asked to look at these faceless figures, or even people who maybe don't want to be painted or photographed, and then there's the whole art historical kind of influence of people like Hammershøi, the Danish artist Hammershøi, who repeatedly painted women in interiors with their heads turned away, and Caspar David Friedrich's figures and things like that. So although you've got this very down-to-earth practical reason for photographing people who look like they're turned away, it seems to become a theme in your work, or a part of your style, that your figures are often turned away. But you're only going to give me the practical solutions.
No, I mean, I like the idea that they're in their own world. So you like what you mentioned about Hammershøi, if I pronounce his name properly, but this idea of looking away and they're deep in their own thought, or deep in their own activities. If, there is that kind of spending time on their own thinking. Now, some of the works I do have groups of people, and they're not necessarily thinking on their own. There could be a group of people queuing up for something, and maybe one or two people within that sense of that space where they're grouped together could still feel like they're on their own. There could be, although they're amongst other people, they're still on their own, if that makes sense. They're still in their own thoughts.
Can I interrupt and ask another? Trying to push the idea a bit further. Then, do you think that if there's also a kind of class theme running through the work, do you think that it would be too much to try to push the idea that if you are of a certain class, you might be more likely to experience this kind of closed world subjectivity as a kind of alienation or something? Do you see what I mean? I wonder if part of the sort of struggle, if you like, of being a working class person is something to do with lacking social skills, for example. Feeling like your life is a small bubble of constant struggle or something, whereas maybe a more middle class, more affluent people feel like they've got networks, and they're good public speakers, and they're good communicators and storytellers and things like that. Do you see what I mean?
Yes.
So given that kind of reading, I was looking at these paintings with the figures with their heads turned away, and thinking that it's an illustration of a mindset, in a way, of a kind of class mindset.
Yes, absolutely. I totally understand that. I always feel like I believe I come from a very working class kind of background. And I think that it is hard to navigate especially in the art world, where it's predominantly a lot of middle class people who have money. So I'm talking to, I was the other week, I was at an exhibition opening, and went to that gallery called Grimm, spelled all capitals GRIMM, and great gallery. The artist was on show as Matthias Weischer, really good show, great painter. But I'm in that exhibition and I'm talking to people that I know, and I'm like, how you doing? What are you doing? How's the painting practice going? And it's all lovely, but they're able to work full time in the studio. Or they're represented by like a big gallery, and or even if they're not necessarily with a big gallery, they still got money coming from somewhere, which means they can work full time in the studio. Whereas for me, I'm about to start a new part-time job next January, working as a learning support assistant. And it means that I then struggle. What you gain in money to make work, I lose in terms of time to be able to spend more time, because they want more work. They want, the galleries want, like I was told recently, 12 small works, 6 medium and 3 large. And to be consistent at the level of quality that you're known for making, the work that you do, consistent. Yeah. And you're like, well, that requires a lot of time, but they want it within a year, between, like, how am I going to do this? So yes, I feel that real tension, that the need to go out and earn money because I don't have rich backers.
Yeah.
Or do you know what I mean? So yeah, that's for me an element of my, like I think if I start to think about Marx idea of political, in terms of analysis of capital and the working classes, then where the idea of like the proletariat, in a kind of wider sense, the proletariat sells their labour in order to, continue making whatever it is you do, to continue your everyday life. The need to sell your labour. So yeah, there is that definitely. There's always definitely been that tension.
Yeah, I mean, I think that probably the art world in London, or the many art worlds in London, I think they've all become more gentrified in the 10 years since we last worked together. We have art centres and studios opening up around us, and the prices of the studios are just phenomenal. But they quickly fill up, and there's lots of people around with lots of income, inherited wealth. I think they buy second homes in London. They rent an expensive studio, but I think there's always a trap in kind of class interpretations. There's always the problem of becoming resentful and sort of bitter about this difference, and it seems to me that that has to be avoided at all costs as well, because then they've even got your spirit, they've even got your soul, in a way. And it strikes me that a lot of painters it strikes me that you mentioned earlier on George Shaw advising you to do it yourself, basically, kind of go out and just do events and create your own little art world, despite all of this. I think that's important and true. In the end, there's different art worlds within the art world, and maybe there's a very rich person's art world, and maybe you could just sort of leave them to that and create your own as much as you can. But I was also going to say that I was thinking about someone reminded me of Giorgio Morandi the other day, and I keep seeing Giorgio Morandi everywhere when I do the washing up, and I see all these three little pots, and I think, oh yeah, it's Giorgio Morandi again. But I was interested in the idea that another response to this problem about the difference in wealth between potential artists. Another solution, like George Shaw's solution in a way, but another solution is to find that your difference within that dichotomy. You find that you've got your own difference, and somebody like Morandi seems to have painted every day as much as he could. I mean, probably Morandi is quite a wealthy person, I suppose, in the end. So maybe my analogy is falling apart as I try to create. But what I mean is that there can also be a sort of blessing in being pushed into this marginal place, and having to find peculiar ways and means to get by, and find peculiar little time slots in which to paint. I think Morandi might have been wealthy or middle class. I don't. But I remember hearing that he didn't really have a studio. He had a space on a balcony that he could only get to by going through his sister's bedroom or something like that. So he didn't have masses of space, but he adapted to it and created this kind of masterful series.
Yeah.
Do you see my point?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I've had moments not quite like on the balcony, but I've had moments where I'm literally working in the kitchen.
Yeah.
And in a way, I like that, because it does. Okay, I'm going to get literal here, but it reminds me of the kitchen sink painted, and then I painted the kitchen, and then it was in my bedroom. Push my bed out of the way and try not to make my room smell too much. But yeah, it's nice to actually have a studio.
Well, Rauschenberg painted on his bed, didn't he? He actually painted his bed. So.
Oh, right. Okay. That's good. I like that. But no, I like when you mentioned about is this idea of trying to, in a way, find your own sort of something that distinguishes you.
Yeah.
And that for me was something that was always there, because I knew Jules Shaw was someone that people would always reference for me.
Who was that?
And
Sorry, I missed it.
Jules Shaw.
Oh,
So
Shaw, yes.
yeah, people will always reference Jules Shaw, which is fine. You know, I don't have an issue with someone saying, "Oh, you know, do you know Jules Shaw's work?" You know, it's kind of okay, fair enough. But I do remember once having a crit, and it was when I was at art school, and they said, "Oh, you're painting for Jules Shaw," and now the subject was very different then.
Yeah.
It was about growing up in an estate where I grew up, and it was that kind of subject that George was doing.
Yeah.
So I can see the point, and then I made a big change. I was doing on my degree,
which is probably what crits are for.
Yeah, well, yeah, absolutely. Tough. It was tough,
yeah.
But beneficial. But that stayed in my, you know, the back of my mind for quite a long time, and. So yes, going back to 2011, funny enough, after my master's degree, and then I had a bit of a gap between that and 2011, I was obviously still doing certain stuff that I did on my MA. And then from 2011, I went to see two great shows on a Saturday, actually, in London. It was an artist called James White, and Jules Shaw, obviously. It was at the Royal College, a group of artists that studied at the Royal College.
Yeah.
And it was on that day that I thought I had that moment where I thought I can use enamel paint still, and rather than just working in colour, let's work in black and white. And for me, it kind of made sense. And then I just did a couple of simple paintings of a subway, walking around the London Underground, took photos of the floor at Bank, you know, the pattern tiles. I then just converted that to black and white, and I just made those paintings. And then a few times I was walking around at home and started photographing my wife at the time, neighbours across the road. And I saying before with someone else, it wasn't a case of I purposely wanted to paint people. It just become something. Why run from that? I just document these people. And then I went to a cafe and I started documenting these people at Bethnal Green in the old cafe called Nico's Cafe. And it was at that point that I started to just print off these photographs of someone and looked at the qualities of the image, very moody, very dark, quite melancholic. Really, in a way, it said a lot about how I was feeling as well as an artist and as a human being. I felt quite melancholic. It felt like it was coming across. It was radiating to me, and I really felt there was something there. So I did these simple paintings, just very straightforward, nicely made, visually made sense. It just worked. And then I took those paintings to my former course tutor, Christopher Carwan, at Byam Shaw, and it was him himself that said to me, "Do you know the artworks and movement that we know as kitchen sink?" I was like, "Yeah, I know about kitchen sink. Yeah, I know about that. I remember watching a lot of kitchen sink films when I was younger. Kes being one of my favourite ones, and." Yeah. It was that with that information, I then kind of went back to my studio, well, home at the time, and I realised, I've got something here, and I've got a language, I've got something that's historical I could refer to give context to what I was doing.
Yeah,
and that's when it really. I started to play on that.
Was what Chris referring to? Was he referring more to the painting school called kitchen sink, or the sort of kitchen sink movie tradition?
Both. He was talking about Don't Look Back in Anger. Room at the top.
Saturday night, Sunday morning.
Yeah. And the book as well.
Honey. Yeah, I've got a big list of them somewhere. I think.
Yeah, fantastic. I thought it was brilliant. So yeah, even the book itself, Friday night, Saturday morning? I forget now. I read that and I thought it was really good. Really enjoyed it. And then I kept thinking about the record by the Specials. what was it, Saturday night, Sunday? I forget now what they called it now. But the Specials did a song that had some similar title, and I
Right.
thought, oh, I like that. So yeah, and also obviously John Bradby, fantastic painter. I mean, his paintings were a lot more, gosh, thick oil
Yes, I
paint
know them. Yeah.
on surface, whereas I was using enamel, which was like watercolor but
Mm.
on board because it's so thin.
Your
Um,
paintings are relatively small and crisp compared to that school in a
yes,
way. Yeah.
yeah, definitely. Yeah, I mean, I've moved away from enamel paint. I'm not working with enamel anymore. That was
Mm.
because of they were taken off the market a couple of years ago due to health
Okay.
reasons, apparently. Um, I was like, oh god, that don't sound too good. Um, so it was off the market for about 8 months, and I could not get any enamel paint. So I made the decision to start using oil paints.
Mm. Maybe George Shaw bought it all and hoarded it in a big warehouse somewhere.
Yeah, probably. But yeah, so it's been a nice move. I enjoy oil paints
So
now.
in George Shaw's paintings,
Hmm.
the spaces and the architecture and the lampposts and the trees and everything are left to tell the story, because I don't think you often or ever see figures in his paintings. Is that right? As far as
That's
I
right.
remember them.
Yeah,
Whereas your paintings are definitely strongly focused on on a single figure or a pair or a group
yeah.
of figures.
Well, the thing with George Shaw is that he has said himself those paintings they're empty. Well, saying that he has made some art paintings not long ago where he's in the work.
Ah,
So there's a picture of him up against a tree having a pee. There's him walking down a road.
oh yeah, that would make sense for
Yeah, but
him to appear.
that's right. He's only done a few though, so it's not like his main intention.
Yeah.
Mo, but he has said himself the reason why he chose to make paintings of that Coventry Tile Hill of empty of anyone was because it's about him. And as soon
Mm,
as he starts putting another person in the painting, then it becomes about them.
mm,
Um, and I get that. I understand that. It makes a lot of sense. So yes, with when I started to make paintings with someone in the painting, it wasn't about necessarily a direct relationship about me, but the people around me, about the people.
mm.
Um, but saying this, I had recent with, consultation not long ago with a few people at Gertrude, an organisation, and they said your works are they're quite literal, they're quite direct, and I'm like, okay, I understand that. That makes sense, but it is kind of trying to reveal their social environment and them in their space. And I suppose they are direct, but the way it was said was maybe it'd be more interesting if you were making a painting where you see objects in the space, such as a laundrette, a book on a table, or a cup on a table, rather than the person. And that will say also a lot about that politics of class. And I'm like, okay, well, that does make sense. I get where you're coming from. There's ambiguity as well.
Mm.
But then saying that, I was talking with someone else, and they said the directness in the work is what makes it, that's the strength, because they're being very direct and to the point where it can make the viewer uncomfortable. And
Mm.
that's the power of your work. So it's like you get that information, then you get that information, then you have to, in your own mind as the artist, like, okay, so how do I
Yeah.
progress?
I mean, from my point of view, as I say, I'm interested in the fact that there are figures. There's multiple figures often. Sometimes there's a small kind of crowd or group of figures. There always seems to be somebody, or most of the people, with turned away from the camera, or turned away from the painter, if you like, and turned away from the audience. And like I say, I think that allows me to think about the subjectivity in a working class experience. where maybe you don't feel well connected. For example, you feel like your group is small, or you're on your own. You're sort of struggling on your own. To me, the paintings work well like that, and in that way, they don't operate like George Shaw's paintings, but there is a sort of there is a darkness. There's a kind of there's a darkness which, as I said, I didn't take a lot of notice of the chronology of dates as I looked through the PDF. I should have done, but I didn't notice that. But it seemed to me that that's pretty consistent. There's a quite a dark kind of palette, and sometimes places where everything is dark. There's one picture that just seems to have a little bit of sort of high vis on the back of someone's jacket.
Yes.
Whereas everything else in the painting is almost black. And
So I would say that to a certain degree, it's almost to a certain degree accidental. In the terms of I'm responding to the images that I'm producing and converting. Now, I say accidental, maybe not, because obviously when I convert them to from color into black and white, I'm looking at them on Photoshop, and I'm looking at the qualities of light. So I might edit the light, and I am trying to alter the lighting slightly to give it more atmosphere, more mood. Which in some works, I don't think I hit the nail on the head, and I had to rework those works to bring more mood and atmosphere to them, because I think that's what makes it more powerful. So, I would definitely say that there's a melancholia within the way I appreciate my images. There's something about melancholia there.
Well, it can be melancholia, but it can also be the working class have also got a kind of teeth, kind of seriousness and a project, to escape from this, or to gain respect, or to be promoted, or to be taken seriously. Melancholia makes it sound like they're just they or we or whatever we're talking about. It's just kind of victims suffering. But I think that maybe one of the things that the middle classes find a bit scary about the working class is that they have got a project. I think maybe I mean a lot of their project you might think has disappeared. With the sort of collapse of the Soviet Union, the collapse in the belief in communism, the kind of middle class that seems to gain more and more territory all the time until it seems to occupy everything. Even occupies working class traditions, like having a season ticket for Arsenal or something became a kind of middle class thing to do in the 90s or something. So I'm just saying that I think there is a sort of darkness, but I wouldn't want to think of it as something disempowering or necessarily melancholic, but maybe just something that refers to the serious side of life of people who are not on the top. People who are not comfortable. Not comfortable, not having opportunities, not having doors open for them. Just that slight, that sort of. There's a darkness to it, but I'm trying to suggest that the kind of crispness of your paintings make me feel like this working class experience also has an edge. It's got a kind of it's got an edge, and you might maybe find it in working class sense of humor or jokes, a bit of black humor, or I'm sort of rambling a bit now, but working class people can be need to be tough in a way.
Yeah, absolutely. No, that is so true. Yeah, I totally agree with that. It's interesting. In a way, when I think about also the aesthetics that I've chosen to continue working with, I mean, there are times when I keep thinking about working with color as well, and I try to force myself. It's like I'm trying to hack my own ongoing, like long game, or the long term of working in a certain way that I try to hack that, and I find so difficult because I naturally just want to continue to work in black and white. It's a natural thing. But the idea sounds great. Like, the idea sounds good to be able to work with color as well. But as soon as I do it, it takes me about an hour to get into that process, because it's sort of shifting the mind from working in tonal values to thinking about the way color works. And I used to work in color before my master's degree. I was working in color, even a laundrette. But I find myself naturally drawn to the aesthetics of black and white. Now, I'm also thinking, when I was advertising the show at the Nunnery Gallery back in 2014, I spoke to the organisers, and I remember saying, can we have it advertised in Art Monthly? And they did ask, why Art Monthly and not maybe Turp's Banana? Because it'd been a painting school. And I said, well, because I felt like something like Art Monthly for me felt like a journal that spoke about art in a more conceptual way. And I wanted to be able to say, look, even though I'm working as a painter and trying to make it more conceptual, not like, I'm not saying I'm a conceptual artist in the traditional conceptual, sense of conceptual art, but I wanted to be thinking that the paintings have a conceptual edge to them. And that, for me, the idea of black and white framed it in that way for me as well. I mean, I've had conversations before, public conversations, where we talk about the John Moores Painting Prize.
So you're saying the black and white encourages the reader or the audience to read them in a more conceptual way than if they were colour?
Yes. So it's like a kind of statement in a way. It kind of puts the reliance on something that becomes too emotive. Don't get me wrong.
People might say, "Oh, here's Nathan Eastwood. What a wonderful colorist."
Yeah,
and thereby sort of overlook a lot of the things that you'd rather than to be detained by or something.
Yeah. Now, don't get me wrong. I like there to be a certain aesthetic, so it brings you in. It brings you in a sort of you want to look, because there might be a certain amount of beauty within the work, but I want you to be brought in. And then hopefully the data or the content will leave you thinking more about the subject, the idea of a food bank, the idea of how the vulnerable were having to keep going back to like some kind of food bank. I want to. That's why I'm hugely into Charles Dickens.
Your food bank painting has a splash of colour in it, does it not?
Yeah.
Very deep colour. It's a very deep and unusually deep use of colour, I think.
Yeah, that was okay. If I think you're referring to the one I made in 2017, actually that painting was food bank, was in colour, even though it's still dark and moody. It was that work. So in 2017, 16 and 2017, I went through a stage of trying to work in colour because of my personal life changed massively. At that point, I thought, well, if that's going to change, let's try and do something radical within my art practice. So let's work in colour. And I did. And it was, that painting, Food Bank, funny enough, got sold in a show at an exhibition in Mayfair, out of all places. Mayfair.
Yeah, Charlie Smith's show.
No. It was a show called, I forget the name of the show, but it was organised by...
There's a long tradition of that idea, though, isn't there, of the wealthy dealer or art appreciator, kind of philanthropically or perhaps charitably or maybe even condescendingly or at best patronizingly, but in the best sense of the word of being a patron, reaching down to wanting to buy the painting of the food bank rather than any of the other paintings because it most clearly directly points to poverty.
There's always this feeling, though, of guilt for me because I am an artist, and I hopefully will have collectors of my work, because it's a subject that's very close to me. Now, in 2016, 17, I felt very vulnerable that I could also be in a situation where I might have to use a food bank. So it felt very natural for me to do that kind of subject. But I still felt that guilt of making money out of a subject that other people were struggling. And even with this painting there, I actually helped set up that organization 25 years ago. So it's
which organization?
Well, the name of the organization is called Caring Hands in the Community.
Ah.
And it's set up by a local church, just not far from where I am, actually, in the studio. And I, 25 years ago, was a member of the church. So I helped set up this organization, Caring Hands. And this was before, when food banks were, on the news, or Ken Loach.
Before David Cameron and George Osborne invented them.
Yeah, basically, in a nutshell. So that was for homeless people around the area to have food, that sort of thing, a place for them to go. So I helped set it up 25 years ago. When I say help set it up, I was one of the ones also helping, taking food to the hungry in a van, etc., etc. So I was part of that story. Now, for me, that has personal history, but at the same time, it's a subject that I felt had to be painted because it's the document of our times. It's
the shame. Sorry if I keep interrupting, but the shame and guilt you talked about earlier on are also interesting aspects and difficult aspects of working class life. I think that if you grow up in a middle class professional family, your relationship to money is just different. It's got a kind of fluid kind of carelessness about it, because there's always some money there. There's always money coming in and going out, of a kind of professional middle class family. I'm sure a family like that is working hard in its own way, but it's just a different relationship to money than I think of what I think of as working class people. It's true that if you're used to, I read about this in the book Classanoia, actually, if you're used to grafting or even sweating or even getting horribly dirty for long hours a day or many or five or more days a week, then you have a certain understanding of what you put in for what you get out, kind of thing. And I'm old enough to remember actually my first pay packets, which were literally brown paper packets with cash in them and a little calculation. And they're always disappointingly tiny. And I'd usually spend them before Monday. I could pick them up on Friday and then be borrowing money to get through to the next week. But that is working class experience. You find it in all that classic literature you mentioned in your statement, like Robert Tressel's book and things like that. And in those kitchen sink films, in a way, it's the way the economy seems to be rigged, so that as a working class person, you can't quite afford to rent your home. You can't quite afford to get to the end of the week. You can't quite afford to have a holiday. You can't quite afford to do this and that, and you slip into debt into this other realm, etc. Sorry, I'm sort of rambling a bit, but when you talked about the guilt and shame of making money from a painting about a food bank, then I just think that's very familiar to me and interesting, and it's sort of debilitating as well. I remember when I first started teaching, and or first published a piece of writing and got paid for it, and you have this almost kind of sort of shameful feeling. How can I deserve to have that? I haven't done, instead of doing 7 days a week of sort of laboring, I've done probably like 40 hours of writing and got paid twice as much as I would have done for the grafting or something. And I'm just saying that the subtitle, one of the subtitles of my book is Handbook for Class Migrants, and this is one of the problems about the migration when you find yourself coming from one class but trying to reach into another class, or trying to become another class. Then this is one of the problems, is that you just actually see the economy quite differently, and it's very hard to adjust to what you get paid for and how you get paid in that society, in that class compared to your original class.
I have a question for you, actually. One of the questions I actually wrote down last night. But actually, I was wondering if you knew the author, Dan Evans, who wrote this book.
No, I don't know that, but I would make a note of it.
It's brilliant. You'll really like it. I spent pretty much most of this year just rereading this. It's one of those books where I keep going back to. I never quite finish it in a short period of time.
Yeah.
But there was also I come across the book because of the organization Novara Media.
Yes, I do. Yeah.
Yeah. Now Dan Evans did they did a podcast on a Sunday. They do their downtime where they interview an author or someone to do research. And Dan Evans was interviewed, and that's how I came across him. This was a couple of years ago. Absolutely fantastic 2.5 hours of a brilliant conversation about basically class politics. And it does in this talk about the idea of, him, the author, who was from Wales, found it very difficult to go back, times, say Christmas times, when you go back and you go and see your friends and family. And he felt, because he was now he has a PhD, he's now a lecturer, he felt like he couldn't, like no one wanted to be around him because he was like, oh, you're now this petty bourgeois, I can't relate. And he felt, he felt that real tension. And he talks about this openly and candidly. He speaks about those issues, and it's really good. I find similar situation with my own relatives.
It points to another problem is that I think if you're from a family that's established as middle class for generations before you, and you grow into that middle class family, you can carry all the contacts that are already in your family through into your professional life, and you can even carry the contacts from your college life and your university life through into your present life, and all of these things become a kind of network. Whereas when I think back to the council estate where I grew up, there's only one person who I'm in very slight contact with. Maybe we talk once a year, and that's because I couldn't cultivate long-term relationships on the council estate where I grew up, because I knew all the time I was on the council estate that I wanted to get off the council estate and get away from there. So I didn't want to cultivate any lasting. Do you see what I mean? But when you think about the difference between where I am now and that kind of journey, I didn't pick up any network along the way, whereas I think a lot of people from middle class backgrounds have kind of got built-in family networks before their own life begins, kind of thing.
Absolutely. And that's the thing I was reading as well not long ago, is that the idea that most middle class artists who might have grown up within the household where their parents were lecturers or were involved in the arts somehow, and it was natural for them as children to also then grow up and then to go into the arts and have the natural one. They already have the demeanor, they already had the language, they knew how to talk about
art. They just feel legitimate. They're legitimated, I think. They're legitimated in a way that I never was, and I felt like I had to keep fighting and struggling and arguing and working really, really hard and trying to excel just to become legitimate. And I think it's the imposter syndrome thing, but it's still with me right now. It's still with me right now. The things that I wish I could publish, or I'd like to get my book reviewed in the kind of leading journals, but I find myself cold calling again. But I've been working in London for 40 years now. But in some ways, there's a lot of days where I feel like I'm just at square one. I've got loads to say and I've got loads to write, but I haven't got very many outputs for it. And that book is artist self-published. It's me and my partner just pulled it together ourselves because yeah, because there's not many books out there like that, and because you get really tired of just you're cold calling, knocking on doors. No one answers the door. That's the most classiest thing of all is when no one even responds to you, and that really makes you feel like, oh yeah, I'm right at the bottom of the staircase again. But all you can do is like keep on keeping on, and
yeah, it's interesting. I feel the same. As a contemporary like yourself, but as a contemporary painter, I won that prize in 2014, and I thought things were going to make I thought that prize was going to make a huge difference to me. Me and my wife at the time were finding things not always easy in terms of our finance. She was doing her BA at Camberwell, so we were always struggling with our finance. So when I got that prize in 2014, I honestly thought, would this be a change where, when you're at art school, you're told about when you graduate, get your master's degree, and then try and work as a lecturer, part-time lecturer, and then look to be represented with a gallery. And that was this is what it was all about. That's what that's this very, very fixed idea. And then over the course of those years, around 2015, 16, 17, when things weren't going that way, I started to feel disillusioned, to be honest. I was like, this makes no sense. Even winning that prize, I thought that was going to be an opportunity to be working with a decent gallery and then hopefully make a living from being an artist. Didn't quite really pan out that way. But so I've recently been on over the last year, I've been on a mentoring program that I've been mentored to. So I've been part of a group of others and on a mentoring program. And we were certainly encouraged to explore. I mean, the whole mentoring program is so middle class. It's just
but useful nevertheless.
Yes, it is, and I actually, because I've worked as
essential, maybe,
definitely. But because I worked for a year as a DT and art technician, I saved up some money, so I was able to pay for the course, and it was good. I met some lovely people, which I'm still friends with as part of a sort of post the program, and we have a group of us, 15 of us. And that's nice, which is nice to be able to have monthly conversations with each other. But the point is that, I was able to pay for that, which was very, very good. But one of the big emphasis that we were told to do more of is things like this: expand and have studio visits. Increase your audience, increase the conversation. It's about having a conversation with other people that you relate to. I don't just want to have a conversation with maybe, I don't know, writers, curators, artists, whoever that I might not relate to. I want to be able to have a conversation.
Doesn't mentoring mean something slightly different than that as well? That mentoring at best to me sounds like somebody's got your back, somebody's there who can point to things that you can't see. There's a ladder over there. It's been sitting there all for the last few years. You didn't never notice. There's a way out. There's a way left. There's a way right. To me, the best experiences I've had of mentoring, if I've had any, have been somebody you can sit down and talk really candidly with about how vulnerable you really feel and how much of a struggle it really is for you, because we all kind of actually maintain quite cheerful surfaces, but underneath things can be really, really difficult. And it really is something to have dedicated your whole life to something like art. You've thrown in all your cards, and you're completely committed to it. And if nothing seems to be coming back that you expect, in the way you'd hoped or expected, then I think a mentor is somebody who can give you confidence and believe again, and point to roads and tracks and paths, or just give you a link, or just give you a phone number, or contact with somebody that can take you onto a new path. I did make one book for Routledge a couple of years ago, because I kept making these books, kind of artist self-publishing books, and some people kept telling me, well, you better do something with a big publisher, a proper publisher. So I sort of did that, and somebody did point me in, a kind of mentor figure did point me in a good direction, and that came around. It's left me in a bit of a funny place, because I'm still not quite sure how to repeat that or extend that or counteract that or something. But somebody said to me once that when they were speaking to a really kind of posh acquaintance about their career, that this very posh person said, "Oh no, what you need is a champion." And I thought that was lovely. It was kind of old Edwardian concept or something. Not. It's a kind of mentor, but a champion is. It sounds better, actually. I quite like this idea of having a champion, somebody who goes around waving the flags for you and letting people know you're great, and introducing you to the right people at the right time. But maybe a lot of middle class people do have this kind of inbuilt mentoring and inbuilt champion in their careers and families and social networks that people from working class backgrounds don't have. And so yeah, I just wanted to say that you've been through this experience of mentoring, but to me it means something a bit more specific. It's not just about learning to work in a group. It's actually about having someone who can give you the right phone number at the right time in your career. And that's really important too. It's like
I get that.
I've had some wonderful creative experiences in the kind of highs and lows of my career in writing about art. There's a time which is difficult and dark and unproductive, and you can't work out how to get through or get around it. But sometimes the problem is the opposite one. You get on a roll and you get on a high, and there's loads of stuff and ideas coming out. But the problem with that is that at that point is when somebody needs to catch you and push and lift you up to the next floor. And if that doesn't happen, you've just burned out loads of brilliant new ideas and found yourself back where you started, and the energy driving those ideas is gone. So what I'm saying is that I think this mentoring figure, this champion figure, to me is also someone who comes along at the right moment. Exactly, when you need a certain kind of lift, or you need to be shown a certain ladder or doorway through which to go. Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah,
maybe I'm dreaming of an ideal, but I think that's what a good mentor or a good champion would do. And I really feel kind of bad about the amount of times when I've felt I've gotten a really great creative role with an idea for a project or a certain kind of writing, and it starts to pour out loads of ideas, or even a series of publications or something that suddenly starts to occur, but realize that unless somebody catches you at that time and gives you a helping hand to move up to another level, then it's kind of burned off, and the opportunity is missed. It's kind of lost in a way.
Yeah, I understand that. I mean, I would definitely say that a couple of years ago, someone I know who's funny enough a publishing house, and they were trying to encourage me to get a certain amount of works done, and rather than get this amount done as quickly as you can within the next 3-4 months. And I kind of tried to pursue this objective, this task, but it kind of never really went anywhere, really. It kind of, you feel like they might be able to nudge you into the place where you really want to be, but it didn't quite happen that way.
Yeah.
And I did feel slightly that feeling of false hope, that feeling of false hope, and it never really materialized. But with the network I've been on recently, I'm still a member of the network, this mentoring network. I pay some money each month, which isn't a lot. But like you say, one of the things I find really very useful is that not only is it's good to know in terms of how to maybe, how to conduct oneself in an exhibition opening. Don't do this, don't cold call, leave maybe crumbs, do all these different practical things. But one of the best things I enjoy is that I'm able to, if I have more concerns around the psychology of being an artist, the psychology of making work, the vulnerableness, feeling vulnerable, the emotions I've had to deal with over the years, certain amount of imposter issues, where they're, even things like trying to deal with the idea of working in black and white or color, this big issue for me for years. And I'm able to then write down these concerns as part of our group of us on this board where we can write stuff. And I know that the organisations, you might know them, they're called Kerry Hand. Very good, but they're amazing. But I can write something, and it might be more feeling vulnerable as an artist, and I get so the response is extremely very intuitive, very, very honed in to me. So it's not just about how do I how much should I sell this print for? How much should I sell this painting for? It's how do I deal with this emotionally? How do I deal with this in terms of the psychology of being an artist? And that's amazing because I get that.
Sometimes when you're in a bad place, when you're in a bad place or feeling vulnerable or feeling resentful, or you can actually make more mistakes. You can say the wrong thing at the wrong time or to the wrong person because you're not in a confident place, and then get into these kind of downward spirals, I think, as well.
Yes. Yeah, it's similar, isn't it? When you if you get a message and it's a little bit antagonistic, don't respond straight away. You spend time away.
Yeah, I've learned
because you need time to think, because you might be too emotional when you respond, and then makes it worse.
But those situations come about for people who are already vulnerable. I think who a bit like kind of raw nerves.
Definitely.
With the art world without much protection, kind of thing. But
so
we should get back to your paintings. I was going to quickly ask you about you mentioned belonging to a church, and a couple of your paintings, one is called A Preacher and one is called I can't remember now. There was two references to religion.
That's true. Is it called Our Daily Bread?
Oh, maybe there was a third one. I thought there was Our Daily Bread, The Preacher. Maybe it was.
Okay, that's interesting. To be honest with you, I've not actually. So my relationship with the church or Christianity at the moment, I consider myself to be left-wing, socialist, and Christian. I got into reading. Well, I say reading. I like the idea of what's it called, liberation theology.
Oh yeah.
So that Mexican.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
Well, maybe we could, is there any way of squeezing that into a reading of your images?
I don't know. I'm not entirely sure at the moment. I haven't even thought about how that would be.
Now I think about them looking religious. I can see the sort of play of light and dark starts to do. It's more Caravaggio-esque or something, or maybe there's something more Christian or something to be seen in these little crowds or huddles of people, or people on their own. Or in 17th century Dutch paintings, you often see reading, don't you, or wearing kind of crude lenses for spectacles, and sometimes what they're reading is the Bible. I believe
that's
and I just thought it was quite interesting looking at the paintings behind you on the wall now. You can start to sort of do this rereading through Christianity or even liberation theology, but maybe we have to think about that one. But
yeah, for sure. I must admit,
liberation theology in Nico's cafe.
Yeah,
that's where revolutions begin, isn't it? In cafes.
And why not? Why not?
But we don't usually expect them to begin in greasy spoon cafes.
Maybe that could be a great place for a church, and a greasy spoon.
Yeah, well, no, there's this idea of revolutions beginning in French revolutions or English revolutions beginning in coffee houses and what used to be called coffee houses and those kinds of cafes. But it's quite funny to transport the idea to the greasy spoon. But yeah,
Yeah, why not? I
a lot of
mean,
big political
football.
events start in cafes, don't they?
Yeah, yeah,
There's that
definitely.
story
Yeah.
about Tony Blair and Gordon Brown as well,
Oh,
going to the same restaurant and planning their whole ascension to Whitehall, to Downing Street. Anyway, sorry, it's a
okay.
bit of a mad run
No,
of
no,
thoughts.
no.
I just noticed that there was a slight theme of religion, and I wanted to know a little bit more about it. But it's been quite productive, that question, I think. So.
Yeah, yeah. When it comes to yes, okay. So it was more about having a reference to the idea of, if you want to say religion or Christianity, but in a way from the everyday. So the idea of our daily bread, it was that connection with the need to be able to survive. You got paintings. There's work about food bank or people queuing up for food in a church, and
Mm.
it's that kind of our daily bread is there's still this need. It's almost looking up to something that's beyond oneself. The idea that something that's inexplicable, something that's beyond the veil, behind the curtain. There's something that need to look up, that help from somewhere. And there's
Yeah,
that, but I didn't want it to be overtly explicit. Like I'm not trying to make a religious painting like in the
no, no.
Renaissance, but I wanted to make that connection in a way that was less, like a bit more playful, a little more, maybe ambiguous to a certain degree.
Yeah.
But the
It's,
title
in,
is
it's interesting. Sorry to interrupt again, but
yeah.
it's interesting. I made some little notes about the way the light is painted in, for example, Nico's Cafe, and it's really
Mm,
exquisitely painted, and I can see why why you won a prize
mm,
for it. But it reminded me of Chardin's paintings, where he paints a kind of relatively banal event, like somebody making a house of cards on a desk or something, or seeming to pass the time of day, but the daylight becomes really beautiful, and the way it's rendered as an object becomes really beautiful. And there's a tradition of someone like Chardin that goes right through to someone like you and Uglo, who's painting with this incredible
okay.
precision, these sort of geometrically formed objects made of light almost. And but it also goes back probably to Renaissance painters like Fra Angelico or something like that, the kind of things that David Hockney loves, where the paintings
Mm,
seem to be made um, of light. And but also just quickly going back to this thing about the food and the cafe and the
mm,
revolution, etc. Give us our daily bread.
yeah.
It's got all this kind of uh, religious emphasis, but it's pious or kind of holy thing to say, but it's also, as you're suggesting, about bread and butter issues. Yeah,
Mm,
it's about food banks. It's about, can I get through today? If I'm going to
mm,
have lunch, where can I go? You end up at the cafe that suits your budget, don't you? And
mm,
the so-called greasy spoon cafe. You can go there as a middle-class person and
mm.
put a picture of your full English breakfast on Facebook, etc. But for a lot of people, there's no option. It's the only place where you can actually get a cup of tea and a place to fill in your daily express Sudoku or whatever it is.
Mm,
And I did
yeah.
write about this in my book. I talked about do you shop at, do you eat at Greg's or Gale's? Are you a Greg's person or a Gale's person? And it just struck me that the place that you feel comfortable eating or you can afford to eat is very definitive of your class. you know,
Yeah.
and
Yeah. Yeah.
there's really strong class divides depending on the restaurants where you feel comfortable in, or they're too posh for you, or the places you wouldn't be seen dead in because they're not posh enough for you.
And it's also like when you go shopping, are you going to go to M&S or when you go to Sainsbury's?
Yeah,
Um, you know, there's that feeling as well. I mean, yeah, but I was going to say something. I forgot what I was going to say now.
That's my fault for rambling.
It's fine. I was going to ask you as well. You obviously wrote your book, and does much of it is it a reflection of your own sort of, like you were speaking about at the beginning, this idea of progression through how you've done certain jobs working as a lecturer, and that is the book in itself like a reflection of you and your own understanding of where you are in society? It's like
I suppose it's a book I had to write. I mean, it sounds a bit pompous in a way, but it's like what I mean by that is a book I had to write, no matter what the consequences, because I think a lot of people won't like that book. I think that I was writing in a way. I'd made this book for Routledge, which meant I'd sort of tick the box of, can Paul write a proper academic book for a major journal? And I'd done that, and it left me in a funny place that I couldn't quite work out what I was supposed to do next. And then it made me realize that I was still sort of writing as a way of sort of jumping through hoops. I was still sort of showing other people that I can do good tricks. And I started to think, oh yeah, bloody hell, I'm still writing for approval, but when am I going to start just writing, as myself and for my own good reasons? And I remember thinking that of all the writing I'd published, which was a lot, I really think I've published a lot since I started publishing in 97, and I lose count now, but it must be in like 500, 700, something like that, pieces of professional writing I published. I don't really know how to count them now, especially with everything going online. But the point I'm trying to make is that I remember thinking, oh my God, I've been writing and publishing all this stuff, which I do think is good. I think it's good writing. It's as good as anything else that I see in journals or publications. But I started to think that I'd been afraid to hurt anyone's feelings. I'd been afraid to ruffle any feathers because I was coming from as an outsider from a different class. I feel like despite all the writing I've done, I've always still been trying to show everybody that I'm not a person who left school without any qualifications. I'm not a person who grew up on a council estate. In a way that I'd spent a long time trying to perfect a writing that was a beautiful surface, a beautiful sheen that makes me look like a middle-class person in a way, like a professional writer. And so with the next book I made, I just decided to let it be a little bit more loose and casual, and not to be too afraid if I drop a clanger here, or drop something on someone's foot there, or offend someone a little bit there, because we're supposed to be involved in debates and discussions and arguments. And we're supposed to take risks and go out on a limb. And I started to think, well, I've been writing all this time, and maybe I thought I was doing these things, but I haven't even started doing those things. And so,
interesting.
So I wrote that book with a little bit more abandon. And it didn't have a refereed editor kind of thing. It was just edited by me and my partner who made the book. Everyone who's read it gives me really great feedback on it and says, oh, it's the book I always wanted to read, or it just shows you the similar experience to my experience. And obviously not that many people have read it, because I haven't really even managed to launch it properly yet, or I haven't really managed to get any reviews written of it or anything like that, all of which would be lovely. But I'm just saying that, the book is a lot about my own journey. I called it Classanoia, or Falling Up, because which we could go into somewhere else, but maybe and I also called it a handbook for class migrants, because I wanted it to seem helpful to other people who are coming the same way. Because I mean, in a way, I'm moving towards my retirement age now. So if I write stuff, really, I should be thinking about kids who are just starting, who are going to foundation course when they're 21 or something, or 20. Maybe they could benefit from this book. But I don't know if that answers your question. But I totally understand that. There's a lot of sort of biography in it, autobiography in it, but it tries to also kind of wend its way around lots of ideas I've had about class for a very, very long time. And
I think
I've probably written that book before in other forms, in other bits and pieces elsewhere. There are a lot of the ideas I've been thinking about for years and years and years. But
yeah, and it seems like if we're not allowed to deal with class, it's like we're not allowed to talk about class politics. It's almost, I get this feeling like, so I've been writing my artist statements in order to put on my website, or I'm trying to have a conversation with other people, and there's this feeling almost like, well, no one cares about class politics, right? What I do, and I don't agree. I don't agree with this closure that it's not of a subject of importance for contemporary art, because it is. And there are writers such as yourself, and there's Dan Evans. There's people who are writing about class politics. But this is the thing for me. I hear a lot of people say to me, "Oh, you know, for the last 10 years, there's been this real interest in identity politics." Okay, and I'm like, right, okay, and I see that, like, you know, recently with the Turner Prize winner, there is that emphasis on identity, the idea of vulnerableness, the idea of difficulty, learning difficulties, which I think is great to see an artist achieve success with, even when they've had learning difficulties. Now, I think that's all fantastic, but at the same time, there's this kind of, we deal with identity politics, but at the same time, we would not allow the base, the most fundamental base, which is class in itself, to be part of the conversation. And I'm like, I want to react against that. I don't want to.
No, I think it's true, and I think as I wrote the book and as I tried to promote it and launch it after I'd finished it, which I found unusually difficult, and it was to do with that. It is to do with that problem of maybe it's a paradox, and maybe it's a contradiction that's impossible to overcome. But you're trying to write. How do I explain it? You're trying to write. Candidly write a book about a working class experience, but the only way you can actually call that book successful or achieve anything is if it gets the blessing of middle class people who ultimately are the world, the art world that we are trying to succeed in. And unless you get the blessing of middle class people, and at the same, unless you get the blessing of middle class people, then your book is going to or your painting is going to disappear without trace, and not find the context that it needs. But maybe the only solution to that is to do exactly what we're doing right here and now, and what you talked about earlier on, or what George Shaw said, is that you just have to roll up your sleeves and do it your own way.
I agree. And I say that, you're right. To use that word paradox, I definitely think that is the thing we're dealing with.
Maybe that's why the book's called Falling Up.
Yeah. Okay.
It's like living a paradox, living a contradiction.
Who was it? I watched a lecture by, is it Chris Neiman, if I get his name correct, who works at Goldsmiths, left wing, has a lot to do with Counterfire, the organisation. But he spoke about how, you know, the book houses, publishing houses, the galleries, they're owned by capitalists. And it's like, you know, they're gatekeepers. You know, how do we, from the working classes, have a voice when we're kind of governed by those very capitalists? Which, for me, I find, how do you negotiate with that? On the one hand, you're trying to give a voice for the working classes, or even say that the social systems that we're living under, which is traditional social realist idea, needs to be changed.
I just want, it just reminded me of something else that's in the book, is that I told the anecdote of using the word capitalism in a lecture. When I first started lecturing, I gave a lecture to a big hall of first-year students, I think it was, undergraduates, and I used the word capitalism a few times in the lecture, and a student came up at the end after all the other questions had been asked, And another student came up at the end and said, do you mind me asking, are you a communist? And I mean, the reason it was interesting was because they thought that if somebody uses the word capitalism from the lectern, then they're anti-capitalist, that they're hostile to capitalism, which I am in a way. But the point, but that's not the point. The point is that the word, which to me is just the description of the socio-economic system in which we live. Capitalism is the socio-economic system in which we live, and so when I use the word capitalism, I'm just referring to that basic fact. But funnily enough, it got me thinking and listening. I listen to the radio news all day long, and I listen to the World Service News and Radio 4 News and other radio station news, like a lot of us, all day long. And I had noticed that the word capitalism is very, very rarely used in any news report, in any sort of current affairs programs. Everyone's talking about the effects of capitalism, the results of capitalism, etc., etc. But no one actually uses the word. It's like a kind of word you're not supposed to use. But the same thing applies to class. That when you, I think I wrote this in the book, that when you use the word class in a middle class context, the middle class context immediately thinks that you're attacking it, and that. I remember seeing a BBC or a TV journalist talking to Jeremy Corbyn, and every time Jeremy Corbyn said something about class, the journalist who was very posh, kind of English middle class journalist, would attach the word war to the word class. He'd say, "Oh yeah, so now you're talking about a class war." And then blah 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 blah. Someone would say class, and then he'd bring back this word war into it. So if you use the word class in the middle class context, then you're seen as somebody making war on the middle classes. And if you use the word capitalism in a lecture, it means you're a communist. Do you see what I mean? But in actual fact, they're just objective facts. That there is something called the middle class, there is something called the working class, there is something called capitalism. And that's the system that we run by. Sorry, that was a bit confusing.
No, totally understand that. You're just saying for what it is. That's what it is, and that's what you're referring
to. It means you can't
sense.
talk about it objectively, because every time you talk about it objectively, somebody will respond to you in a negative way, thinking you're attacking them, and that makes things very difficult, and it makes it less likely that your book's going to get reviewed.
Do you think the principle applies then also to artists making paintings? That if you're trying to reveal something about glass, then those middle class people that normally patronize galleries will see it as a kind of maybe an attack on them.
I think it's impossible to. I think it's impossible to imagine that middle class context disappearing. If anything, it gets bigger and bigger, and it takes over more and more cultural territory. It takes territory from the working class actually a lot. So in the end, I think our game, whether we're writers or painters interested in class, I think our game is always still going to be to somehow provide for them. I think you'll always be trying to provide for a middle class context, because you're not going to get rid of the middle class context. So then I suppose it leaves you in a kind of artful place that you just have to be artful about engaging that audience without scaring it away, or pleading with it to understand your difference and your position, which it doesn't seem to understand. I just can't get. I think it just can't get its head around it, because the middle class person that I'm working alongside in the university or whatever just may never have had the experience of doing 20-hour shifts driving 7.5 ton trucks around the M25 like I have, or working on a building site in the winter like I have. Those experiences are formative, and spending like all the time I had between leaving school with no qualifications and the age of 40, when I first got a job as a lecturer and published my writing, that 20 years between leaving, or 20 more than 20 years, I was just not earning a penny, not knowing where to go, trying to do things that were really seemed impossible. And so I didn't even start my career until I was 40. So you're sort of 20 years behind everyone else for in your middle class college, you're 20 years behind them for a start anyway. So I'm just saying that these formative experiences and the equivalent middle class person's formative experiences mean that we're never really going to understand each other unless we write well, I suppose, or talk well, or paint well, or maybe in the end all we've got is our creativity and skills to
which is probably why
to be understood and try to level the playing field a bit.
Yeah, I kind of wonder sometimes the way I work as a painter, that kind of reliance on a realism, if you like, is trying to, in a way, make a kind of painting that I know would be appreciated by the middle classes, because it's this there's that kind of, you're presenting it clearly, it's concise, it's of a certain aesthetics that they appreciate from the past, So is that my trying to do this in a way that I'll be accepted as this artist knows what he's doing. Do you know what I mean? There's that kind, and you just
I think the middle class is incredibly expensive, and it can incorporate all kinds of things, can't it, into it? You hear white middle class people referencing Jamaican dancehall language or something like that, or like I said earlier on, buying football season tickets, or it can appropriate, it can take all kinds of attacks, it can take all kinds of criticism and turn it into its own territory. So I don't think we need to feel shy or afraid to sort of fire some interesting bullets at it, because it's very resilient, and it knows how to accept criticism and turn them into a new part of its own territory.
Interesting enough, you reference back to your early days of leaving school without qualifications. That was me. Too. I left school at the age of 16 in 1989, and I had no GCSEs on me.
Well, I left school with 1 grade B art O level.
Oh, right. Okay. At least you had that.
And I went straight to the unemployment office. Anyway, let's not dwell on things too bleakly, but
where I am now, my studio, if I go to where the windows are and look to the right in towards Chatham, there's a bench because I'm by the river. There's a bench not far near the river. When I was 16, 17 years old, I remember going to the careers office, trying to find out what am I going to do with my life, basically. I got this A4 sheet of paper with a list of courses I could do in the local art school, and all of them asked for GCSEs and then A levels. And at that point, because I didn't have GCSEs, I thought, I don't know what I'm going to do because I can't go to art school, so I've got no GCSEs. Until 3 years later, I got accepted onto an art course based on my portfolio. Which was like, brilliant.
Well, this is the thing. Yeah, this is another thing that we must never forget is that where would we be without the art school, the middle class art teachers who took me into the foundation and opened my eyes to Jasper Johns and Kurt Schwitters and Robert Rauschenberg and all these things, and also the art teacher who for the first time in my life said something I did was great. She said, "That's great, Paul." I said, "What do you mean? What do you mean? It's great. What do you mean it's great?" I mean,
that's brilliant.
I'll never forget those people, and they made the difference between me being stuck on that winter building site or driving that truck, or finding my way to being a lecturer with a PhD and publishing a book for Routledge, etc. So
brilliant.
And that's why I think middle class people shouldn't be too afraid of us and our voices as well, because we do appreciate what middle class people give us, and that we are actually, whether we like it or not, we're aiming to play and contribute in a middle class context.
I understand that. True.
we're not going down to the local pub on the council estate and showing our writing or paintings there. I mean, we might do, but I don't think that's what we're doing. I think we want to play on the best pitches.
Yeah,
And,
yeah, I know that. I was going to ask you,
I want to
so
be running out of time a bit because
yes, I was going to leave with one of the. I know obviously it's been really good, and I did have a few questions to ask you because I didn't want it just to be about my work. I want to
I
understand
think it's been
because
quite 50-50 so far. Yeah.
oh, brilliant! But because I want to just learn so much more. But one thing that's been playing on my mind for quite a while, really, and I think I'd love to hear what you have to say about this. And that is, I've been sort of reading and listening some podcasts about the subjects of contemporary art and then fine art. So you got contemporary art and then you got fine art. Now, fine art deals with traditions of academia, life drawing in a more old school sense. And then you've got contemporary art, which is more, I don't know, David Zwerner, the art gallery, or dealing with more conceptual concerns, whatever. But for me, I'm trying to distinguish in my own work because I want to know that I'm consciously working in the contemporary art field rather than just making old school fine art, if that makes sense. And for someone like yourself as a writer, artist, what are your thoughts on that? Do you think about, do you think there's a difference between contemporary art and old sort of traditional fine art? Because there's still MAs, isn't there, at Royal College and Royal Academy, and it's fine art.
Yeah.
Yeah, so
I don't know if I've got anything very valuable to say on that, except that there is a little essay by Giorgio Agamben called "What is Contemporary," and it's quite short and small and accessible and beautifully written, and it makes some lovely points about what is contemporary. I think it uses fashion as an example. Actually, it says some interesting things about fashion and the contemporary, which you can see there's kind of something interesting to be said there. It's part of a little booklet, and I've forgotten the title of the booklet, but there's a little booklet, and one of the essays is called "What is Contemporary." So I recommend you read that because it's quite short, and maybe I should go back and reread it. I wanted to bring it into my teaching with the students, but so far I haven't really managed to do so. So that's one thought. The other thoughts are a bit more foggy. I think because I don't think I do make a distinction between fine art and contemporary art. I think the word contemporary art became useful because of the idea of postmodernism meant that we had to find a language for something that was not modernism. We needed we had this new category and this new idea of postmodernism. But I think that then we needed to supersede that as well, and we needed to go beyond postmodernism. So postmodernism became a kind of a particular sort of historicized time, funnily enough, almost a style. I think a lot of people wanted to treat postmodernism as a style that we went into that was very anti-modern. It was different to modernism, etc. But once you'd exhausted that game, the word contemporary just became useful to stand in for everything because we had this really expanded new relationships between all kinds of art. Some of it was fine art, and some of it was purposefully bombastic, like the whole YBA project is purposefully bombastic. I mean, Sarah Lucas makes art about the trucker masturbating or something. I don't think you can call that fine art, but you can call it contemporary art. But at the same time, you mentioned David Zwerner's gallery, and if I think of a Korean Dansekwa painting or something like that, beautiful kind of transcendent abstraction or something like that, I'd call that contemporary art too. I think contemporary art, refers to the whole expanded field of art that postmodernism encouraged us to allow us to think in much broader senses. But the word fine is there to refer to what you said, a certain kind of elegant and considered tradition that goes all the way back to the Renaissance or something like that. That finesse and that fineness. And then, but the contemporary art somehow can include bombastic YBA, Sarah Lucas, and an elegant Korean monochrome painting at David's Werner. So I'm not really giving you a very good answer, but
no, it's fine. I think it's one of those. It's a very, I would say, I personally think it's quite difficult. It's quite difficult. I think they both overlap. Artists want to, artists will use a certain kind of painting procedure, but it might be from you discovered when you were in a fine art course on an MA. I think
your paintings are fine art because they have they inherit that legacy of finesse that I saw in Uglo, and I saw in Chardin, and I saw in Fra Angelico. You're still pursuing that tradition, and I would call that fine. At the same time, I think they're contemporary because, in actual fact, and fortunately enough, a few more people seem to be talking about class now than were even last year or 2 years ago. I feel like there is some little wider conversation bubbling up, and I want to be part of it and participate in it. And I think your works are contemporary in that way, that they're talking about contemporary issues, but they never stop being fine.
This is why I think that the book that you've written, book you wrote, and the other book that I have here by Dan Evans, I think we're dealing with the subject of something that's very contemporary. Has currency. And I think it's important, while we live in the kind of society that we live in, how we choose to describe it, be it through writing or painting or sculpture or video or film, it's contemporary, it has currency. And I think that's what, in a way, makes my work not just about ordinary people in that figurative sense, which is quite fine art and traditional. Maybe that's with Jules Shaw paintings, we've referred to Jules Shaw, those emptiness of the spaces, in a way, that was quite contemporary because it was painting, but it was a little bit ironic. You have an empty space, and it's about a place with people, but they haven't got people. So it's about him, and it's about an empty space. And it felt contemporary. When it's like, if you paint people, it's a little bit old school, it's a little bit, it felt like you weren't allowed to do that in contemporary art. Post YBAs, quite punk. You've got to be contemporary. And I think that the subject that I'm depicting, the subject itself conceptually, is what it gives it currency. Even the black and white, the moody, slightly minimal, slightly pared down, that in itself as well has that post-minimalism. I mean, Malevich said no more painting after the black square, but it's like, well, no, we still are painting.
Well, I really should stop in a minute.
Yes.
There's one last thing I wanted to say, which was thanks for drawing attention to my book. I know it was supposed to be a studio visit, but it became a bit of a 50-50 in conversation, I think. But I think a lot of people could benefit from and enjoy watching this. So I hope you can. Maybe we should edit off the first bit where we had a lot of technological problems. And I think after the Wi-Fi settled down, it's been a nice conversation and maybe useful to other people to listen to. And in that respect, I think it's also true that sometimes my partner just gives me a kick up the backside and reminds me of what I have already done and what I have achieved, and that you should really stop and count your blessings and feel proud of what you have achieved. And even sometimes I think to myself, well, maybe I've done everything I can do. Maybe I've done all my best work. But that's okay because it's quite a good range of things. But the point I was trying to make is that also we're both relatively mature artists, and we feel like we're struggling, and you sometimes feel bitterness and resentment about these things. But in actual fact, we're probably both good models for younger students, younger artists coming up, and younger writers coming up, and we probably have made a bit of space for other voices. And we should be proud of that and aware of that.
That's nicely said.
That we are mature artists and we have mastered something, and that took a long time to do, and you can bequeath that and share it with a younger generation as well.
And I still think you know what you've written here, and I need to read it properly, fully. But what I have read and what you are writing here, I feel, and what you've been talking to me about, where you feel like this is maybe becoming you actually saying what you really want to be saying without worrying about the middle classes, what they think. I think maybe this is where you're now at that place where you've more that you've got, but where you really want to be. And there's that sounds exciting. I know you work with photography as well, don't you, as an artist?
Yeah, I have done. It gets more and more squeezed out by teaching and writing, So my
Yeah.
practice gets squeezed out. But I keep it. I hang on to it, and occasionally, like a video I made about a video I made suddenly got revisited last year unexpectedly. So which is quite nice, But
Yeah, of course. With now being at a time of my life where I feel like I can start organising things a bit more. I am looking to do stuff like shows, group shows, like I've done before, and I
great,
am looking,
yeah.
for, yeah, and I'm looking for artists such as yourself and others that work. If you work in, if, with judging by this book, if that's the nature of your work as well, I'd be really like to include that in
Yeah,
projects
well,
I
that'd
will
be
do.
another conversation. Yeah, in what
Mm.
way the writing actually reads across into the photography and video works that I made. That would be
That'd be interesting.
yeah. We should do this again.
Yeah, definitely, definitely. Thank you
Yeah,
so
thank you
much.
for inviting me. It's been a great afternoon. Yeah.
Well, enjoy your swimming. I can't swim, but I hope you enjoy your swimming.
I'll teach you sometime.
Oh, well, there you go.
But
I'm all,
it would be a kind of avant-garde swimming lesson.
there you go. You just said it. Contemporary art, avant-garde. I was gonna all I'm gonna do this evening is I'm gonna go home later this evening. I'm gonna do some gaming. I'm going to go to do some Skyrim.
Oh, gaming. Well, I can't game. I've never gamed in my life.
Never too late.
All right, Nathan.
Yes,
Au
thank
revoir.
you. Yes, you take care of yourself, and I'll speak to you soon. Let's
Yeah,
end
thanks
that.
so much for inviting me. It was great.
Lovely, thank you.